What's up, guys? Welcome into the At Large Bid Bearcats podcast brought to you by the Riverfront U. Tonight, I'm joined by UC wide receiver and Hall of Fame broadcaster, Jim Kelly Jr. Jim, welcome into the show.
Hey, I'm glad to be here, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy. We were talking off air. We're already on game prep for week 2.
Right.
Bearcats are coming off a 66-13 win over EKU. Just first impression on what you saw on Saturday.
Yeah, I think, particularly this year, first games are always tough to judge what you're coming into. And now with the new coach, a bunch of new transfers, a new league, there was a lot really kind of like up in the air. And certainly in watching, the 3 weeks out at higher ground, and then when they returned to campus, you knew that there was talent there. But you're just wondering how quickly and how well they could put it together. And boy, they sure answered the bell there. They really looked good against Eastern Kentucky, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, which quite honestly was the side of the ball to me that had more question marks than the defense.
Sure.
The defense had some folks back, but that offense looked really, really good.
Obviously, that offense started with Emory Jones. He had a career day. 7 accounted for a school record, 7 total touchdowns, 345 yards through the air, 19 of 23 passing, just a storybook debut for him. You had a chance to see him in the spring, follow him a little bit in the summer, and then into fall camp. What has his progression been like compared to what you saw on Saturday?
Yeah, he looked in the spring. He looked really like he was brand new into the program, very indecisive. Probably made some errors and so on and so forth. They didn't really allow him to run the football. So he kind of stayed in the pocket and tried to throw it. But you have to understand also that on the receiver side of things, that a lot of those guys weren't here in the spring either. So he didn't have a lot to work with, but he looked really, really rough. Well, then you get to Camp Higher Ground, and all of a sudden he's surrounded by some wideouts. Plus he's more familiar with the offense, Coach Satterfield's offense. He started to improve, and in my opinion, looked really, really good week after week after week during fall camp, or if we want to call it summer ball. And then as he got back to campus, continued that. And boy, what a debut he had this past Saturday against Eastern Kentucky. More completions more touchdowns than incompletions. 6 touchdown throw or 5 touchdowns. Brady had another one, but 5 touchdowns for Emory and 4 incompletions. That's quite a day.
Yeah, absolutely. That first drive, let's take a look at that first drive. Coach Satterfield said throughout the offseason, that he's an aggressive style coach. He likes to put trust in both his offense and defense. What do you think, as a former player like yourself, what do you think it said to his team on that opening drive when it's 4th and 5 at midfield and he's going for it?
Yeah, so I think even before that, he kind of showed what he's made of. Tried play action right off the bat, but threw the football. And in that drive, Xavier Henderson, who we'll get to the touchdown in a second, literally caught 5 passes. He only gets credit for 4. 1 was called back on a holding call. But I'm telling you what, they came out so aggressive. And then that 4th and 5, and you're thinking, okay, and even Emory kind of echoed this. It's the first game. You're at the 50-yard line. You got, a guy who's an All-American punter. Why not punt the ball, try to put him inside the 10-yard line, play defense, which you've got a good defense. That's how a lot of conservative coaches would have played it in the first game, particularly. Not Scott Satterfield. He came out throwing on 4th and 5, and not only did they connect on it to make the first down, that was a 49-yard touchdown pass to Xavier Henderson from Emory Jones.
So wide receiver, that group was one that, really there were a lot of question marks heading into spring ball. And then as the summer progressed, it kind of seemed like it became one of the strengths of the team. What was your first impression on that wide receiver group? And looking at last year where they had 2 future picks in Tyler Scott and Trey Tucker, is it crazy to think that this year's group is better than what they had last year?
No, it's not crazy at all. It's really not crazy to think that. First of all, they've got a nice mix of different talents out there, and quite honestly, Trey, Trey Tucker was just maybe an inch shorter than Tyler Scott, but both of them were kind of, I won't call them short because believe me, I played wide receiver at 5'10", and that's Trey was about 5'10", Tyler was a little bit larger at 6 foot, but both those guys were excellent. They had great speed. Well, now what you're looking at is guys like, like Xavier Henderson, like D. Wiggins, guys that are 6'3", Evan Prater, 6'4". And then you've got guys like Braden Smith in the slot that, are maybe only 6 foot or 5'11", but can do those underneath routes. So they've got, I'm telling you what, and I know we're going to talk about Pittsburgh here in a little bit, but Pat Narduzzi had a press conference on Sunday, and he says this is the best wide receiver room he's ever seen. Mm-hmm. And that's quite a compliment. And a guy that's been coaching at a high level, was in the Big Ten as a defensive coordinator for a lot of years, and now has been a head coach in the Atlantic Coast Conference in the ACC for 7 or 8 years. That's quite a compliment.
Corey, let's transition to the running back position. Corey Connor, 13 rush, 105 yards. As a wide receiver, when you have a running back that really gets it going like that, especially with that 54-yard run, how does that help open up the rest of the offense as the game progresses?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think at first, Eastern Kentucky was able to stop the run. And when I say that, they were playing the run. They knew Cincinnati was going to try to run, and they were a little bit outmanned in the secondary. So they wanted to try to get to the quarterback as well as stop the run. And there was, right out the bat, kind of feeling each other out. 3 yards here, 4 yards here, 2 yards here for a host of running backs, not just Corey. And then Corey broke the big one. And what that does then is make you really kind of keep your eye on the run. And that takes those DBs, just all it takes is that, that little look in to see, okay, I saw play action. Is the guy got the football or not? And then all of a sudden by that, you have people running by guys or making breaks and different routes that find themselves open. And so I think the running game was really, really good. Corey obviously had a big game at 105 yards. He's a guy that's he's one of those guys that gets you 3, then gets you 2, then gets you 4, but then all of a sudden he breaks one for 20 or 30 or 40. In this case, 50 some. He's maybe not the Jerome Ford who's going to take 189 yards to the end zone, but he will break some arm tackles and get you some big yards along the way. So, I think all in all, the passing game is a little ahead of the running game, which I honestly, even though there was a new quarterback, new receivers, I think with the offensive line being new as well, I think that was expected. But all in all, an A- for the running game, an A+ for the passing game.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with, the offensive line play. There wasn't any time throughout that game where I'm sitting there and my attention focused on the offensive line, because it was, if you're not talking about them, they're doing their job. You know what I mean?
That's right.
So I felt like, especially with so many new pieces, Gavin Gerhardt, the only returning starter from the offense last year, for so many new pieces, I felt they played extremely well. Obviously, transitioning to Pitt, they're going to have to, ramp that up even more. Pitt, very aggressive style defense.
Yes.
Big physical up front, corners that are going to try, play press man. At a first glance, what are your impressions on this Pitt defense?
Yeah, I did not see any of their game against Wofford, but reading through the stats and kind of reading a couple of the Pittsburgh papers and just looking at the stats, it was uncanny how close it was in a description of the game to UC's, because you'd think, because Narduzzi's been there 7 years, and that is a difference between Scott Satterfield, who's in his first year, and Pat Narduzzi, who's in his, and I can't remember, it's 6 or 7 years, but he's been there a while. But Pittsburgh has a brand new quarterback. They have 3 new wide receivers. So, and I think that's just college football right now. There's so many transfers. But that being said, their style hasn't changed. And when Narduzzi was the defensive coordinator under Mark D'Antonio, both at UC and then at Michigan State, I absolutely loved the way that he played defense. So aggressive. Now I hate it because it's what I'm going to see this week against those great wide receivers we were just talking about. He will play press coverage, and they will belt these guys as they're coming off the line of scrimmage. Now, the advantage there is, and Coach Scott Satterfield, when he was coach at Louisville, played him 3 years ago, then played him last year as well, lost to him 3 years ago, and then beat him last year. So they've seen him. They know that defense. There's nothing new. And you were there, Ryan, for the one press conference. He emphasized, if not, 3 times, 20 times, we got to get rid of the ball quickly because he knows what they're in for. And that's that rush that you were talking about and those receivers being held up on the outside. So it's a different level. It's certainly a different level than Eastern Kentucky. But I will say this, that, Pitt, Wofford is an FCS opponent, just like Eastern Kentucky was. And, they beat him, I think it was 45-7. So they beat him pretty handily. But at the same time, I think the one thing that I did hear is Wofford had like 30 plays. So Pitt really kept
37 total.
Yeah, total plays. And normally, a normal game, you have 65 to 75, and they had 30-some plays. So there's certainly a difference there. And I think they scored late in the game, Wofford did, to make it, to at least make it not a shutout. But Pitt's going to be good. They really are. However, you have to feel good after the Eastern Kentucky game that the Bearcats are going to be competitive. You really do. And this is one that it's so early to say this, but it's a pivotal game. This is one that you can win on the road if you play perfect. You've got to play perfect. And if you do that, it puts you in a spot where you are not only competing for a bowl game down the road, which I think everybody's goal is to get that 6-6, but all of a sudden now you're on the plus side of that. And you're maybe looking at, and whatever. I mean, the end would really be up in the air. 9-3, 8-4, something like that, which nobody's really expecting.
As a wide receiver, does your game prep change at all, knowing that Pitt is going to play more of a press man coverage? But when you look at their defense, the inexperience of their defense is on the back end at the safety positions.
Right.
Knowing that, how does your prep and I guess overall game plan change as a wide receiver, knowing that I just got to beat my man off the line, and then there's going to be some wiggle room as far as inexperience after that?
Yeah, twofold. I think one is you got the physical side of it. You got to be ready for, okay? So you've got to use those moves right at the line of scrimmage to get away from those guys. Secondly, you know that you're not going to be able to do that every time. They're going to get a pop on you. Take the pop, minimize it as best you can, get around those guys. And then here's the big thing. If I was playing what I saw this past week and knowing Scott Satterfield's reputation as a play caller, he's going to utilize the fact that those safeties are young. And he's going to call plays that are going to break you into those areas away from those coverages that are going to free you up a little bit. So once you get free of the line, now that's on you as the receiver. And that's where your week of, your prep this week comes in. But then that once he does that, once you get free, that you're going to be running some routes that are going to free you up. So, I mean, you can't take it lightly. It's not that those safeties can't make a play on you as well, but your point's well taken. The inexperience there versus the experience on the outside. I think, what did he throw out? They played a couple of 2,000 plays in their career. Yeah. Those corners. That's a lot of football. That's a lot of football.
Well, then you look at their offensive line. I think the average starter has over 30 games started as well. So the strengths of this team is definitely their offensive line and then their secondary at the corner position.
Well, and you're looking at the offensive line, and they too, as I mentioned before, have a transfer quarterback that's new, but he's not new to college football. And my goodness, is he big? 6'5", 235. He played a couple of years at Boston College, and this is his first year at Pitt. This is his last year too. And I'm trying to read his name here. Jerkovic is his name. He's 6'5", 235. So he, literally, that's a Ben Roethlisberger.
Right.
Maybe an inch shorter, but this is a big guy. And he got done this past week, his first week. And they had some of the same concerns. The fact they knew that he had played well at Boston College, but coming into the Pitt offense, how was he going to play? And he played well. But they have 3 transfer wide receivers as well, all with good speed, all with good backgrounds, came from good schools. One from the MAC, which is, not, I won't say surprising. There's a lot of guys that from the MAC that all of a sudden go up to an FBS, in this case, a group of 5 performer. They're going to be good. They're formidable. They always are a blue collar. I always put them, Cincinnati, and Memphis in the same category. In Memphis, maybe not so much anymore because they're still in the American and they've fallen off. But, man, you want to talk about being in a battle. In a battle. Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Memphis, throw Louisville in there in the past.
Mm-hmm.
They're blue-collar teams. You better put your mouth guard in because you're going to get your face mask pushed back into your nose. So, all in all, but it's a fun place to play. Great stadium. Good, I won't say good fans, but passionate fans. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So Scott Satterfield in his presser on Tuesday kind of mentioned that the key for this week, and you mentioned it earlier, is Emory's going to have to get rid of the ball quick.
Right.
So when Emory was asked about it, he said it's nothing new to him because he's so used to going against Cincinnati's defensive line with Briggs and Corleone and Phillips. How do you think seeing that and having that experience, every day in practice helps with this game prep?
Yeah, well, the one difference there is they're not allowed to hit him at practice.
Right.
In this case, Pittsburgh is going to hit him all they can. But the fact of the matter is, in your head as a quarterback, you have that built-in alarm clock, right? Mm-hmm. And when you see a Corleone or a Phillips or a Briggs coming at you, you're thinking to yourself, even though you know they're not going to hit you live, you're thinking, okay, I should have thrown the ball. And maybe you do, and maybe you hang on to it and just take the sack in practice. Well, that's not going to happen this Saturday. He's going to have to get rid of the ball. And again, I don't want to throw too much on, Scott Satterfield, but he knows that that's going to happen. And he made the comment last night at the coaches show in 2021 when we played, or 2020 when we played them. We didn't know what to expect, and we were a little bit outplayed, outcoached. That we got beat 23-20, something like that. It was a close game,
right.
And we learned a lot from that game. And then last year, they had them, I think, down at Louisville, and they ended up beating them because they knew what to expect, and they were able to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly. So, I think there's a little bit of an advantage there. You still got to make the plays. And Emory, I think, is used to that. He played at a not very good Arizona State team last year too. So he's probably running for his life and throwing the ball quickly as well. I think he knows. That doesn't mean that they're not going to get to him. They will. In this particular case, what the Bearcats give up 2 sacks. One I would put on the O-line. One I would put on Emory. Although the one where it was the strip sack, he should have known to get away from that and step up. That's a tough one, though. You don't always know what's behind you or coming in from the blind side. But Pitt, that's the one thing Coach Satterfield said in that 2020 game, they give up 7 sacks. Now, they didn't do that last year, and that's why they were able to beat Pittsburgh. And that's where the offensive line is going to come in. I think you'll see the top, a little bit more of the 12 personnel, which is 1 running back and 2 tight ends to maybe protect. That running back's going to be asked to chip and to make sure that, you can keep your quarterback upright as well.
Speaking of tight ends, Peyton Singletary obviously had a touchdown reception in the game, but I don't know if you noticed Brock Falk was in there at times, and Scott Satterfield mentioned in his presser that he wasn't pleased with the way the tight ends blocked in that game. How do you think, knowing that, Pitt may try to exploit that with bringing pressure off the edge?
Yeah, I mean, I think they will. And I can't tell you specifically what he saw on the film or on the tape that made him say that the tight ends didn't block well. But obviously, he was concerned, and when that edge is compromised, that's where that's where you got a problem. So, and they are going to have to ask these tight ends to block, and hopefully, him saying that lights a fire under them and they have a better week. Actually, I think 4 tight ends played, and that's a good thing. I mean, getting those guys in there, I think they expected more out of Mateer. And maybe, I don't think he got a pass thrown his way. But on the blocking side, I'm not saying that he was the one that Coach Satterfield was referring to. In the Singletary, to me, that was just a great call. Everybody was expecting that. Emory Jones had just scored on a 1-yard quarterback sneak. They're on the 1-yard line. Yeah. Everybody in the stadium and everybody dressed in, maroon and white, Eastern Kentucky side of the ball, was expecting that to be a run up the gut. And Emory pulled it out and threw just a beautiful strike to Peyton Singletary.
Scott Satterfield and Narduzzi obviously have history and have seen each other in the past. And it's twofold here, but how do you think that familiarity, especially on the Cincinnati side, helps with Scott Satterfield's game prep this week and letting his players know what to expect?
Well, I think it helps him more than it does Pat Narduzzi, because even though they're different teams, it's Cincinnati, not Louisville, against Pittsburgh. Coach Sat's seen it all, and he knows what to expect. And that's not to say that Narduzzi doesn't know what to expect, because it's more Satterfield's team than it is Cincinnati. He knew what Cincinnati was in the past when he coached there. And then obviously he's watched them, go through the run to the college football semifinals. And he respects the program. He never says a bad word about anybody. And again, in his presser on Sunday, he was really, really complimentary of the Bearcats. But I think a little bit of that edge on the coaching side, and that doesn't mean you're going to win the football game, but you still have to go out and play it. But I think a little bit of that edge goes to Satterfield over Narduzzi in reference to knowing who his opponent is.
So you've obviously covered multiple games between Cincinnati and Pitt, especially at now, what is it, Acrisure Stadium?
Yeah, it's hard for me to get to say that. Heinz Field to me.
When you're going and playing in a hostile environment this early in the season, what are some of the challenges? Do you think there's more pressure on the offense, or is there more pressure on the defense in an atmosphere like this?
Yeah, I hear that all the time, and I don't think it makes a bit of difference.
Yep.
And honestly, it's one of those things where there'll be an off factor there. Now again, let's look at the transfers UC has. Those guys, most of them are 5 or 6 year guys. Okay. Mm-hmm. So they've been, Florida, Louisville, Arizona State, Washington State, wherever, you name the places that they've been to, they've come from. Having 60,000 people to them is not a lot of people. I mean, it's what they've seen in the past. Now, it is the same stadium that the Pittsburgh Steelers play in. There's an awe factor there. But I don't really think it's anything new. And quite honestly, I played at Washington, Colorado. I'm trying to think, maybe, the Astrodome a couple of times, but Houston they weren't filling the place at the time. But the big stadiums are really, really nice to look at. And you walk in there and you go, wow, man, this is different than Nippert. But at the same time, once that whistle blows and the first hit takes place, it doesn't matter. You don't know. So, I mean, if the crowd gets real loud, and that's quite honestly, that's one of the reasons Nippert's one of those spots that's really hard to play, because you're right on top of the team and it gets really loud. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it favors the offense over the defense. I would say it favors the defense only because your job is to just go hit somebody and then make a tackle. Where the offense, you you're more on the finesse side of things, trying to, to run the right route, make the right read, make the catch, run with the ball after the catch. Or if you're an offensive lineman, you want to make sure you secure the A gap on the right side. So, so that, Corey Kiner can get through there. So, I mean, it might favor the defense a little bit more. If I was to say it was to shake up one group, it would be the specialists, and not a Mason Fletcher, but the kicker, and and guys like that. That every time you're on the field, you're under pressure. I saw Scott Springer's thing with Tony Pike about the 2009 game there, and Tony made the comment, the nervousest I've been, the most nervous I've been on a field is so first of all, Pittsburgh misses the extra point. Bearcats get the ball back, and they got a minute to drive down the field, right? Or a minute some. They do that, and they score. And he goes, the most nervous I was during that whole drive was on the extra point, because we did not want to tie. We did not want to go to overtime. We wanted to win the game. And that's you think about the pressure on the kicker in a close game like that. Now, maybe this past week, and I'm telling you, Carter, the new kicker, was phenomenal. He made every kick.
Absolutely.
Every kick. No doubt whatsoever. He was like money. So it's nice to have that. We haven't had that over the past few years. So all in all, he didn't show any pressure. But when you're up by a few touchdowns, there's less pressure than when it becomes a close game.
So I think the team only finished with 2 sacks on Saturday. Knowing that you're playing another team who really likes to throw the ball around with Jerkovich, we only saw on Saturday, I think the status was less than 5 times they brought more than 4 guys. They were primarily bringing four rushers each time. Do you think that was more by design, given the opponent and their offense, or is that Brian Brown just not trying to show much of his hand heading into week 2?
No, I think it was more Brian Brown not trying to show things. Now, let's give Eastern Kentucky some credit. They had a phenomenal quarterback, and they have an offensive tackle who is projected to be in the first 3 to 4 rounds. So it wasn't like you were playing, Little Sisters of the Poor, to use an old cliche.
Yeah.
That was a pretty good offense, even though they didn't show it maybe in the game. But at the same time, they also know who Corleone is. They knew who Briggs is. They did a lot of double teaming, and we had at the coaches show last night, we had Dante on. When I say the coaches show last night, on Tuesday night, we had Dante on, and he said that he felt like he was double teamed 95% of the plays. So, but I really think if you look at what Brian Brown has been able to do in the way he's positioned guys and the active status of his linebackers, and let's throw Deshaun Pace in there at the star position, which is kind of that hybrid strong safety / linebacker. I don't think they showed anything. Now, where they use it and how they mix it up, how they try to go after Pittsburgh, I have to look at Brian Brown, who led, his team, Louisville, led the team led the nation last year in sacks. So I give him, credit, and I'm, as much as I have confidence in Coach Satterfield for calling the right plays, I think Coach Brown's going to dial up the right pressures when the time is right.
So if you're naming 3 keys to getting a victory on Saturday for both sides of the ball, what are your 3 keys for offense and 3 keys for defense?
Yeah. Okay. For offense, I think we need to run the ball a little bit better. The numbers were great, don't get me wrong, but when you have a nice run like Corey Kiner has, it pads it a little bit. I want to see a few more 10-yard runs, 12-yard runs, 15 yards. And I think the only one that was over 10 yards besides Corey's was Emory Jones' touchdown run where he scrambled. I'd like to see that. That obviously piggybacks on the offensive line, on how well they do. I think that's number one. I think the receivers are going to do fine. They're going to struggle in the beginning, getting off that pressure off the outside. So that would be one of the keys that I would like to see. And I honestly believe that keeps Pitt off the field a little bit more. Not that they're overly explosive, but, you don't want to get down 2 to 3 touchdowns to these guys at
Right.
home. On the defensive side of the ball, I think you just hit on it, Ryan. The pressure on getting a little bit more pressure on the quarterback is going to be important. I thought the defense played well. I thought the secondary played well. You got a lot of good wide receivers here that they're going to be forced to cover. These guys have length, just like the Bearcats guys. There's a lot of 6'2", 6'3" receivers that they're going to have to cover. So they're going to have to go up. And if you look at, what Brian Threats did, what Todd Bumpus, trying to think, everybody I thought had a good game. Sammy Anderson. So those guys have been sitting on the bench for a period of time while they had guys in front of them, going all the way back to the Sauce Gardner, Kobe Bryant days. I mean, these guys were here then, and they were good players then, but they've had good players in front of them. So I think the secondary did a good job. So all in all, it's a winnable game. You got to play really, really perfect. Mm-hmm. Not perfect, but you got to play well. In this case, I would say, turnovers could be a big issue. If the Bearcats are able to force 2 or 3, only give up 1 maybe, then that's going to be a huge advantage. So as far as keys, running the football and making sure that you are able to cover down the field on the defensive side of things.
I got to get your thoughts on, obviously, the rivalry trophy is not going to be a part of this game. What are Jim Kelly Jr.'s thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you might have heard me on Tuesday at the press conference. So, honestly, when the Big East existed and Cincinnati and Pitt were playing every year, mm-hmm. I thought the trophy, it was nice because it was a rivalry thing. And the river, Pittsburgh's a river town, Cincinnati's a river town. The Ohio River starts in Pittsburgh and comes down through Cincinnati. So the whole idea made sense. But honestly, since we haven't played since 2012, it just didn't make any sense to me to keep it going. And I didn't know. I'd read that, the River City rivalry trophy's back. And I go, whatever. It's just a game. Now, they are scheduled to come to Cincinnati next year, so you'd have that follow-up. However, there's nothing else scheduled. It might be 12 years, 15 years, 20 years before Cincinnati and Pitt play again. So I really don't think it's a big thing. It didn't seem to matter to them that they didn't really want the trophy back for Cincinnati to bring it with them. And I don't think Bearcats, it's not going to cause anybody on either side of the ball to play any less harder or play any harder. Now, next week with the Victory Bell, a little different story. But as far as the River City rivalry, I'm okay with it kind of, whatever, being in limbo, so to speak.
Yeah. Do you, obviously Pike to Benz is going to be at the top of the list. Sure. Do you have any other favorite memories of this rivalry that you can think of off the top of your head?
Yeah, I'll tell you one. And I don't know that he'll be listening, but hopefully somebody will tell him. So my son, Brian, who I don't remember how old, this was before the Pike to Benz. So this would have been, let's say 2007, 2006. And he played college football. Not a big guy. He's, he's a little bit taller than me. He's about 6 foot, maybe 190, 200 pounds when he played. Well, anyway, Cincinnati beat Pittsburgh. Everybody goes onto the field, and the Pitt players, it happened so fast, the Pitt players were trying to get to the locker room. And my son walked up to an offensive lineman, which should tell you right there that he was not thinking. And he got in the guy's face, and he didn't really say anything to him. He made some kind of noise like, and the guy decleated him or took him out of his shoes. He literally just gave him a forearm in the chest, knocked him backwards, and put him on the back of his neck. So he hasn't said a word after football. So, that's not really a memory from the game. It's been a good rivalry. It really has been. There were some fun games. Obviously the Pike to Benz game. If you look at that game, and I know Tony's gone out of his way to give credit where credit's due to Marty Gilliard. the Pike to Bins play was phenomenal, and it'll be talked about. And my guess is Tony will stand at the whatever it was, the 42-yard line, and somebody will be in the end zone, kind of simulating this play this Saturday when we get up there. But Marty Gilliard had the most phenomenal game I can remember. Now, he had a lot of good ones, but this one was the best. When Cincinnati went down by 17 right at the end of the first half, literally, and he took that kickoff back. It might have been 21, down by 21, and he brought it back to 14. Made the game with a little bit in reach, and then he had plays down the stretch that were incredible as well. So, I mean, that whole team, the 2021 team that went to the playoffs was a very, very good football team, top to bottom. But that team, the 2009 team, I'm telling you what, they were special. They really were. And I was asked during 2021, all right, who's better, the 2009 team or the 2021 team? And that's a no-win situation. But I did pick, because we were in 2021 when I was asked, I did pick, the 2021 team. And I do think that maybe their defense was a little bit better. But on the offensive side of the ball, the 2009 team was better.
What are some of your favorite things about going on the road in games like this, especially when it is a rivalry, renewing a rivalry?
Right. I mean, it's the whole vibe of everything to me is so special. So, and there's a lot of things I like about it. I like in this week, I will not be with the team. We're just driving up Saturday doing the game, and Dan's going on to Cleveland for the Bengals game, and I'm actually coming back, but some other folks are going in different directions. But I love being at the team hotel on Friday night. You're around it. You see the players. You see the coaches. You see the family of the players, which along the way, I've got to know a lot of the families of the players. And they'll come over in the hotel to see their sons. You'll see just regular fans that hang out at the hotel. And the whole vibe on Friday night before the game, and then even Saturday morning is, you're getting ready for the game, whether in this particular case being a night game, a lot of the family will be back there for breakfast, and some of them stay there. There's just a wonderful vibe about being around it. Then there is, you're on the bus, and we're not with the players. We're kind of on the third or fourth bus, which is all support people. But you got a police escort. You're going to the stadium. People are, well, depending on where you are, people are waving at you or giving you the finger. And Pittsburgh's probably giving you the finger.
Yeah.
But that being said, and you get to the stadium, and we generally, our equipment for the radio broadcast goes into the locker room. So we'll go into the locker room, grab it, and there's my goodness, the vibe that these guys are so locked in. They got their headphones on. They'll walk out to the field. They'll do a little prayer around the, around the logo out there. They'll come back in, and they're just all locked in. We grab our equipment, and we go upstairs. And then when we get to the press box, it's like all football. You got, depending on the stadium, you got 10 TVs on with 6 different games on, and you're talking to people that you haven't seen in years. Whether it's sports reporters from Pittsburgh or, the Pittsburgh play-by-play and color guys, the TV folks that are doing the game in this case, CW. It's the greatest feeling in the world for me. I am in my element when I get to these stadiums, and all of it goes great. And I just, if and when, I shouldn't say if and when, but whenever I give this up, I'm going to really miss those Friday nights and Saturdays.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jim, we definitely appreciate you coming on tonight. I love your stories. Love your game recaps. It's really a pleasure being able to talk ball with you. So definitely look forward to hopefully having you on again soon. And I look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
Okay, Ryan, anytime. Love to be on. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That's Jim Kelly Jr. This has been your At-Large Bid Bearcats podcast. And record.